Okay. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Staff are going to close the doors. Thank you. Madam Clerk.
First item on the agenda are the minutes of the regular council meeting held Monday, May 14th, 2012. The recommendation is that council approve those minutes.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Robinson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 2 are minutes of the City School Board Liaison Committee meeting held Thursday, April 12th, 2012, and the recommendation is that council receive those minutes.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmussen, second by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed?
Your Worship.
Oops. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you. I'm trying to scroll to the question I remember I wrote on here. And it was about operating agreements, I believe.
I can skip to Councillor Robinson if you like.
No.
No, good.
Okay. Operating agreements on shared facilities. GM advised that identifying which joint sites do or do not have existing operating agreements are not on the city's work plan for 2012. So we have shared facilities going on and have had for a number of years, but we don't have agreements in place with the school board. Do I understand that correctly?
I don't think anyone's taking ownership of that question.
Your Worship.
She's right here.
Well, I'd settle for getting the answer at our next council meeting.
Okay.
Given the time of night.
Well, I'm going to actually ask for Councillor O'Neill's microphone to be turned on because he chaired the meeting. Just a second, right there.
Okay. Yes.
Oops.
The minutes properly reflect the issue that I raised under other business at the committee meeting, because I know it was a concern that several councillors had raised. I think Councillor Nicholson had raised it in previous meetings. So other discussions that we've had over the last several months. So I got this onto the agenda, and this was, as I recall, the answer was that going forward, the operating agreements we put in place, but it's very difficult to go back in time to develop operating agreements for arrangements that have been in place for many, many years. There was all sorts of pitfalls if you go to that, and Councillor Hodge is nodding in agreement. I don't have my notes in front of me now, but that was what we heard from the General Manager.
Councillor Nichols.
Okay. I don't think this is the time to have a prolonged discussion of it, but it seems to me that there are significant risks to both parties in going forward in this kind of circumstance. And I would hope that we would be trying to deal with that and get agreements into place for all shared facilities as quickly as possible. Thank you.
Ms. McKay.
The issue of agreements between School District 43 and the city is of interest to both parties, and both at the staff level and at the liaison committee level. The issue has been talked about and interest has been expressed. However, the busy work plans of staff in both organizations really prevents a focused look at it in this year, but the focus of the discussion is to try to incorporate it as part of the work plans for both organizations next year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. My query has to do with the United Way funds. It's the other business item 2 that are in the minutes, that School District 43 has $75,000 to hire a community coordinator to develop after-school community and summer programs, which I think is fabulous. And I would like to, if we could stay on top of that with them, I'd like to understand sort of how they deliver service, what the impact is, and hopefully that will inform us around how we deliver service and if there's some sort of opportunities, because my experience is that grant money like that runs out, and there may be some opportunity for us as a community to deliver service. If there's a model that they can come up with that might make sense in the future for us to do with them.
And staff are happy to keep track of that and continue to dialogue with School District 43 on their experience with that program. It's significant from our perspective in that access to schools during the after-school hours has been identified as one of the barriers for serving that child population. So with the school board itself rising to that challenge to deliver a pilot program themselves, we are optimistic that they will be very successful with the program and serve to identify the broader needs for many community organizations to have access to those after-school hours to provide programming for children.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the question is the City School Board Liaison Committee minutes. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 3 is consideration of the agenda item rising from this evening's public hearing for City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4302-2012. Text amendment to permit an accessory specialty food retail use in the M1 retail and light industrial zone. The recommendation is that Council give second, third, and fourth and final readings to Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4302.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor Robinson. For those watching at home, this is the public hearing item that had no speakers, not the public meeting item with lots of speakers. Motion's on the floor. All in favor? Opposed? Oh, Councillor Reid.
No, I want to speak, if I may, Your Worship, to the public meeting, as soon as you finish the vote on this.
Okay. All in favor, opposed, carried unanimously. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. In speaking to staff shortly after the public meeting was finished, it was quite apparent, I guess, to all of us that there is some work to be done in consultation between the owners in Windsor Gate now and some of the new buildings that are proposed. And as the FCM is coming up and we have a lot of things on our plate right now, it would seem staff would like some direction. So the prudent direction would be that we direct staff to give Polygon any assistance that they might need in the next 3 or 4 weeks, and hope that Polygon can meet with their residents and come up with some more information or perhaps alternative means of doing what they're trying to do with more units or whatever. But Polygon can come back and direct staff then to come back to council with whatever proposal that they feel they want to come forward with. And I would so
Moved by Councillor Reid, second by Councillor Asmundson, for staff to consult with the proponent.
if needed.
All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Item 4 is report of General Manager Planning and Development related to notification of proposed amendment to the Metro Vancouver Regional Growth Strategy Bylaw number 1160-2012. The recommendation is that Council accepts Greater Vancouver Regional District Regional Growth Strategy Amendment Bylaw number 1160-2012 and the Metro Vancouver Board be advised accordingly.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, seconded by Councillor Nicholson. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. The one thing that concerns me is on the front page at the bottom, it says that this type of change will need a unanimous vote by the Metro Vancouver Board. I'm really, really concerned because that change we asked for months ago.
No,
Councillor Sikora, no, it doesn't say that.
Yeah, it says right here on the bottom. Yeah, it says a majority vote.
Majority vote.
Requires a majority vote of the Vancouver Board and unanimous acceptance from all affected governments.
Yeah. It's unanimous as the local government's one, not the board. Mr. McIntyre.
Yes, thank you, Worship. And I'm sorry if it's confusing, because we were trying to provide some background there, particularly for the 2 new council members, because there was a number of requests from council. And some of those amendments under this new regional plan, we work and live with, there's different types of amendment processes, and it has different bars you have to hit. This specific amendment request, because it's what's called a Type 1 major amendment, it's a change to a a process to deal with the regional plan. It has that very high bar of acceptance. And so, yeah, just as with the acceptance or the approval of the RGS, it requires unanimous acceptance. In this case, I don't think that's going to be an issue. I certainly haven't heard that from the other planners across the region. It seems to be a pretty much, let's get this over with and be done with it.
Okay, that's fair enough. Thank you.
But Councillor Sikora does raise one of the challenges with the RGS in that there is that ultimate veto in some of these items, and this is actually a process to proposal to amend the Type 3 amendment process, which is a Type 1 amendment for some reason, and therefore requires unanimous.
That's why it's uncomplicated.
Yeah. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor? Opposed? And we do that unanimously. Carried.
Item 5 are amendments to the city's sign bylaw. The recommendation is that council give first, second, and third readings to City of Coquitlam Sign Amendment Bylaw number 4297, 2012.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, seconded by Councillor Hodge. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 6 is a preliminary report on applications for citywide OCP Amendment Bylaw number 4314, 2012, and Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4316, 2012, for proposed subdivision at 3501 David Avenue. The staff recommendation is that council give first reading to citywide OCP Amendment Bylaw number 4314, give first reading to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 4316, refer both bylaws to public hearing, and require the owner of the proposed subdivision to provide 5% cash in lieu to...
Moved by Councillor Sikora, seconded by Councillor Nichols. Councillor Hodge. Councillor O'Neill.
Just a very quick comment. The last issue before us, part of it dealt with eliminating redundancies in our bylaw, which was a good idea. You know, we don't like things like gather together, which is our grow in size, a current trend, things like that. This report, I have to point out, actually had redundancy in it because we talked about something being 4.2 hectares in area. We don't need the in area, so we can condense these even more. So
we're trying to distinguish between parcels that are 4.2 hectares in length.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Anyway, just a little aside.
Okay. Ever helpful. Thank you, Councillor O'Neill. Councillor Reamer.
I had a question regarding attachment 2, and interestingly enough, I can't find that on this particular map. I had seen a map that showed Highland.
There's paper. See, it works better than computers.
Yeah, no, it's not got what I originally saw, and yeah, it had to do with Highland Drive, and the attachment 2 that I had seen had showed Highland Drive as coming down into this subdivision, and I don't see it here.
Is it item 8? Item 8, maybe?
Yeah, you know what, it's item 8. My apologies.
Your Worship, that may relate to item number 8.
8.
Yeah,
thanks.
I'll
ask a question for item 8.
Councillor Reamer is often accused of being ahead of her time. So, that's the last speaker. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 7, preliminary report on application for zoning amendment bylaw number 4303, 2012 for zoning bylaw text amendments to the RT1 two-family residential and RT3 triplex and quadruplex zones. Staff recommendation is that council abandon zoning amendment bylaw number 4118, 2010, and that council give first reading to City of Coquitlam zoning amendment bylaw number 4303, 2012 and refer the bylaw to public hearing.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, seconded by Councillor Reamer. Councillor Reid.
Okay. I've read this one backwards and forwards. On a carriage house or a garden cottage, will there be parking on site? Because the way this reads. I can't quite decide if there will or there won't be, or it's going to be smaller, or exactly what's going to happen to it. That's all I need to know.
Your Worship, yes, there will be parking. There'll be 3 stalls, two for the residential unit and 1 for the carriage
All I
house.
need to know. It's just written in a funny way. Thank you. Oh.
Okay. Question answered. Any further? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 8 is a preliminary report on applications for OCP Amendment Bylaw Number 4317-2012 and Zoning Amendment Bylaw Number 4318-2012 for a proposed subdivision in the 3500 block of Princeton Avenue. Staff recommendations that Council give first reading to citywide OCP Amendment Bylaw Number 4317, give first reading to City of Coquitlam Zoning Amendment Bylaw Number 4318, refer both bylaws to public hearing, and require the owner of the proposed subdivision to provide 5% dedication of land to address the parkland provisions.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Secor. Councillor Asmundson.
Thank you. Just a couple of questions. One's on the park, the 2.16 acre. The topography of that park in that area, is that on a fairly flat area land, or is it have a sloping area to that land?
Your Worship, there's obviously, without stating the obvious, there's slope throughout that entire area. The preliminary discussions around the organization of the various elements, including the park, have been held with parks, and they're quite comfortable that this new parcel is a good parcel in terms of its adjacencies, its access, and it's in the slope. So we're quite comfortable it will work well for the city.
Thank you. The other part was in this completion of new north-south local road connecting to Harper, and I was just concerned about the capacity of that road maybe being better as a collector than as a local road for servicing that area. You know, I look at Marguerite up in the northeast right now that runs as a local standard but actually functions more as a collector size, and the difficulties when you have parking or restricted parking on either side. So just something for the proponent people to take a look at the volumes on that. I just want to read in the report, seeing coming off Harper, I'm just wondering about how much volume will be in there. It may be fine. I'm just concerned about that.
Sorry, Councillor Atkins, which road are you speaking of?
They're talking about a new north-south local road connecting Highland Drive and ultimately Harper when the land's north provincially owned or developed. So I'm just wondering to make sure that the road is a 17-meter, but is that adequate enough, and what are the volumes in there? So, I mean, we've had the development down below. We had some townhouses, and this is single-family. I like the density, but I just want to make sure that the road network there is for future capacity ability. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. Attachment 2 here shows Highland Drive proceeding south into the subdivision, and yet I'm looking at the road network that you've got highlighted in color here in attachment 3, and I just can't reconcile this. Can you?
Yeah, Your Worship, I will try. I believe that Attachment 3 shows the original plan, and you can see that we have added the connection between Highland and the actual application. There's a connection we have added, and that addition has been essentially to support the overall connection to this system.
Okay, so the attachment 2 is a newer.
Yes,
okay.
Attachment 2 actually is the actual proposed proposed subdivision. Attachment 3 is the original.
And so Highland will continue down into this new subdivision.
Correct.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Actually, that's helpful. I don't know if it's possible to have the word original or proposed on the attachments so that we flip through them, we know that we're dismissing this one. Councillor Robinson.
Thank you. Just in relation to the park, so is the plan, in terms of timing, are we going to be developing the park, or is this something we're going to ask the proponent to do, like we have in previous park developments?
Do you want to take it? Your Worship, First of all, the size of the park has been sized appropriately so that it actually can be delivered through this subdivision, so in terms of total area. We would be working with Westbuild. Westbuild has been flexible with us in the past, and would at a more detailed stage, we'll determine at the time of subdivision, there'll be roads dedicated and constructed. At that point, we'll decide what the appropriate way to deliver that park as early as possible. It may be contingent on the timing of this phase of subdivision by Westbuild, but we could work with Westbuild to see how quickly that could be delivered.
I'd like to be open to it and see what makes the most sense in terms of our capacity and their capacity. That would be great. Then I have one more question about one of the roads here talks about timing of one of the roads is controlled by the province. And I wonder if you could just speak to that, like sort of what's that about?
Your Worship, yes, I can. That's actually the road that Councillor Reamer just talked about, that connection between Highland and the subdivision. It does go through provincial property. There's been some discussion with the province. They've been generally open and accommodating, but their process is very, very lengthy, obviously, in terms of dispositions. Westbuild's working with that group. But there are multiple connections provided to this area. This area can handle, there's multiple accesses, obviously Princeton, Galloway, so it can handle the volume and total density actually prior to that connection being made.
Great, thank you.
Opposed? Carried unanimously. Thank you for the prompt, Councillor Reid. Nice. Madam Clerk.
Item 9, street vending and special event vending in Coquitlam. The recommendation is that Council give first, second, and third readings to street vending and special event vending bylaw number 4308/2012. That in accordance with the requirements of Section 59(2) of the Community Charter, direct staff to provide notice of Council's intention to adopt the bylaw by the following means. 3, give first reading to zoning amendment bylaw number 4321/2012 and refer bylaw number 4321/2012 to a public hearing.
Second.
Moved by Councillor Asmundson, second by Councillor Nicholson. I lost the bet. I bet that Ms. Lohr would mess up street vending and special event vending. Sorry. I assumed that anyone would, and I assumed that I was about to there too. Councillor Sikor.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor. The one thing this strikes me a little funny is the fact is, currently in place for takeout food. So in other words, what you're saying, that any restaurants that got takeout food, they pay an extra $110 for a license fee? Or is it a delivery service?
Just a part.
Through the chair, it is an additional fee. If you have a takeout window and you're located in your restaurant and you're a takeout, or if you're licensed as a takeout restaurant, you pay that business license fee.
So if you're talking about takeout food, you'd pay an extra $110. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. If you have an additional takeout window, or if you are only takeout.
A special window you're talking about.
Yeah.
But they don't have a special window, they don't pay it.
No.
Okay, thank you.
That's
Can't think of one that has one. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, just a point of clarification. On the top of page 3, the matter that we have in front of us is described as a proposed draft bylaw. This is not draft anymore, is it? This is it. This is the real thing, correct? This is a proposed bylaw, not a proposed draft bylaw?
Is draft redundant, apparently?
Well, no, I don't. I think it's actually contradictory. Contradictory. It's beyond redundant. It's contradictory because it's not draft anymore. Draft maybe when we got it in camera or something like that. So, am I correct? Okay. Thank you. That's it.
Councillor Robinson.
Okay, I think we're getting a little punchy here. In section 2 of the recommendation where we place notice, where we make sure that those who are most affected by this are invited to I'm really getting tired, are invited to comment. Are we going to make a special effort to make sure that the Chamber and BIAs receive this notice?
Through the chair, we can certainly take that action.
Yeah, because I think it's really important. I'd really like to hear from the business community and hear from existing business and potential business owners. So I'd really like to make sure that all our BIAs and our Chamber of Commerce get notified. Thank you.
Thank you. No further. All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously.
Item 10, 2012 grant applications under the gas tax agreement. The recommendation is that Council support the grant applications under the gas tax agreement's Innovations Fund for construction of a district energy system for Coquitlam City Centre and development of a management plan for excavation waste material from municipal operations.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Robinson. Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I support the recommendation, but I wanted to make the point. When I read this report, I emailed engineering and asked a number of questions which I got extremely satisfactory answers to. As to how much is involved, because I don't see any prices in here. What the criteria are for the gas tax fund. So what is it that we have to be able to accomplish to access this source of capital? And then, as far as our internal processes go, how were these two projects selected? What were the criteria that were considered, and what other projects were considered? How did we go about doing this? It seems to me this is great work by staff, but it's comes to us sort of right at the end of the process to say, here are the projects that we want to go ahead with. And we're not told, instead of a district energy plan for Coquitlam City Centre, we might have considered God knows what, any number of things. So we're not being presented with a choice. We're being presented with something to approve without any basis for understanding how we got to this point. And I make the point in terms of future reports because, as I said, I'm quite happy with the answers that I got. I think it was a well-done piece of work, but we weren't told what the work was. Thank you.
Fair comment?
Yeah, Your Worship, I guess we're being, thank you, we're being opportunistic in this case. We're trying to get some funding. I don't know if we'll be successful. There's probably a lot of other municipalities that are going after this particular funding. It is short notice, but we're also dealing with a deadline. I don't know if Dana was the one who put the report together. I don't know if he has anything he would like to add to that.
Yeah, through Your Worship, I guess Councillor Nicholson makes a very good point. I guess in the future we can kind of take, give Council some options in terms of what projects can be selected. It's a good point.
Or, in fact, simply tell us what all your considerations were, and these are your recommendations. I believe our staff always give us good recommendations. Sometimes we don't follow them, but knowing what you considered in coming to your recommendation is really all that I want to know. Thanks.
There you go. Thank you. Further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Carried unanimously. Looks like we're going to be unanimous on everything tonight. Oh, yeah?
Item 11 is the 2012 Municipal Police Unit Agreement. The recommendation is that Council approve the agreement as found in Attachment A of the report of the Deputy City Manager.
Moved by Councillor O'Neill, seconded by Councillor Reamer. Councillor Robinson.
Well, so we're back, and I've been doing a little bit of research, actually a lot of research, and I want to, I guess, preface this by saying that my comments this evening are not about so much frontline policing. I'm not, I would say, unhappy with the service we get from our detachment. I think they do a fine job, and according to the Ipsos Reid poll, I think our residents think that they're doing a fine job. I am concerned, however, around how the decisions are being made at the much higher level. And I'm concerned about, we're signing on to a 20-year commitment. I do know that there's a 2-year opt-out. I get that. It's worth more than $600 million of taxpayer money over 20 years. And that we really, as a council, haven't really spent a whole lot of time in debate. We spent more time actually debating probably banning shark fin soup than we have debating this $600 million contract. And so I think it's worthy of more attention than we have given it. I also think about, when I think about accountability to the taxpayer, and I think about what the municipal auditor would expect of us in terms of due diligence and best practice, I don't think even 60 days is sufficient, actually, to do all the things that we ought to be doing when we're signing on to such a big contract. And initially, we were supposed to have 30 days. We got an extension of additional 30 days. And I've been pretty busy talking to many different folks in our community, in the metro region around some of their concerns. So some of the things that I've learned, the LML, I was really grateful to have council provide us with the opportunity, and I know that a number of us have been speaking with different people, but providing us with the opportunity to talk to different councils and mayors around the region to find out what some of their concerns were and were they consistent. So this is what I've learned. I've learned that that the initial agreement was supposed to provide some better accountability, more openness, and that really what's not clear, even through the every 5-year the review process, it's still not clear what the municipal role is in the Provincial Policing Services Agreement. It allows for one rep for all of BC representing rural, suburban, and urban cities who could participate in presentations as an observer. And I don't think that was sort of the intention that was meant by having greater participation. There are also details missing still after a letter was received actually by Richmond, received a letter after they asked questions. And they only got it May 22nd, so you can appreciate the time crunch in terms of paying attention to all these details. But the wage increase, they even said that the RCMP did not forecast other elements of the compensation package. The cost impacts of the compensation package are currently being assessed by the RCMP and Public Safety Canada. Like you, we await information about some savings that are going to come. So there's really still lots of unknowns about what the actual costs are going to be. Then, with green timbers, apparently that's to be negotiated by a separate agreement. That's not part of this agreement. So the question I have is, so by signing this agreement, can we refuse to sign on to the green timbers agreement? So I'm not sure what that means. And then finally, with integrated teams, with the 70-30 cost share, which integrated teams, it's determined with IHET, but according to the response that came from the province, the other integrated teams have yet to be determined. So we don't know what the other integrated teams, what our responsibilities are going to be. Then, after all of this, just to add icing to the cake, which is I guess a bigger challenge just about RCMP overall when you have such a large organization. Just this week, and even the Premier was outraged, I think, that the RCMP transferred Sergeant Don Roy, or Ray, can't read my writing, who was reprimanded for very inappropriate activities. They chose to not fire him, and they sent him to BC, and even our own Premier is outraged. And so it just affords me some pause to reflect on, are we really... I know that we're between a rock and a hard place, and I don't like being put between a rock and a hard place. I don't think that good public policy decisions, good contract decisions are made when you're in that position. So I would like actually two things. I would like to ask for another extension because I think, like I said, we just got some details back on May 22nd. There's lots of conversation happening between North Van District, North Van City, Richmond, Burnaby, and Port Coquitlam. I've been on the phone with, and I think some of my other colleagues have been, we've been trying to share information and share the load. I think there's still lots of unanswered questions here. I know that some of them are going to be asking for an extension. I'd like to join in that so that we can make sure we get all of our details. So that's one thing. And the other thing I would like is, I would like to identify two council members perhaps Councillors Hodge and Nicholson to consider taking on the RCMP portfolio if they were interested, mostly because I think there's lots of details flying around, lots of information. I know that there's some appetite regionally to take a look at what would a regional or sub-regional policing look like. I do know that there was a mayor's meeting, I have it in my notes here, I think April 20th, but I didn't hear anything about it, and I'd really like to get a handle on what this is about, what other communities are struggling with, and seeing if we can come up with a better model. I'm not saying this is a bad model, but I don't know what other options there are. All we know is this model or perhaps municipal policing, but I don't know that anyone's ever really explored regional and what would that look like. So I think there's lots of things in the air, and I want to make sure that we nail down this contract with all the details. So if there is an appetite to look at other models, we can compare apples to apples, and we can't compare apples to apples unless we make sure that we know what all the details are in this contract. I'm done for now.
Okay. Councillor Asmussen.
Well, thank you very much. I'm going to be supporting this agreement. The negotiations on this have been going on for 4 years. There's been multiple municipal council meetings held to update and inform through UBCM out at Richmond, various events to keep abreast, ask council's concerns, considerations. Mr. Dumont was our staff person leading that. We've had regular information updates in regards to where we're at with the RCMP contract. The new contract, when you talk about integrated units, does change our cost from a 90-10 to a 70-30, so there is a cost saving in that regard. We do know back in, I think, 2008 it was, that this council was looking at how is a municipal force a better way to go, and at that time it was more expensive. And I think right now our numbers will show us that it's between $6 and $10 million more to move to a municipal police force rather than the one we have. We also know that the projected future wage increases of the RCMP are around over 3 years, I think, are something like 5.5%. I think they're projecting the municipal increases roughly around 10% over the same period. So we get a lot of good costs for our money. This agreement was not negotiated with this community. This agreement on the federal government issue was negotiated with all the provinces. Manitoba, Alberta, Saskatchewan have all signed on to the agreement. BC was one of the last ones holding out for some changes. And there was some minor stuff. The federal government said this is a national agreement across Canada on this issue. Of the 62 municipalities in BC now, I think 42 to 45 are already signed on to the agreement. So 2/3 of the cities in BC have signed on to this agreement. I think the RCMP provides a valuable service. There's issues with any large organization of that size that you may not like, but that also has a lot of benefits to it and its ability to provide policing services here. Our choice really on this is we have a deadline. The federal government, and it's been given to the provincial government, is there's not going to be an extension of the deadline. That's been recently given to us. I think 5, 10 cities, maybe in the Lower Mainland, are not going to change the federal government's desires to change a contract that they would then have to go and change nationally across the country is going to happen. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Our choices are 2 directions here. One is to sign this contract and move on with this agreement. 2 is to move towards municipal policing with a higher cost to our taxpayers. Do we want that? Do the taxpayers want that? I don't think so. So I think this contract gives some better oversight, some controls on it. Let's find out. Let's see if it works. If it doesn't work, we can always put in a notification of a 2-year time frame to leave. Municipal or a Lower Mainland police force has been in discussion for a long time, and there is nothing within this agreement, once again, that stops the metro region or whatever from creating its own local regional police force, and they would just simply give notification of 2 years. So that can still happen within this agreement. But, you know, I think there's some of the cities here is good politics, maybe some grandstanding on this issue where we don't have, and we are in a rock and a hard place, we don't have a lot of ability to change this. As I will repeat, this agreement has been going on in negotiations for 4 years. One of the first things I came on council, I asked for the negotiations to go back to the old formula of rather than 90-10 on basic policing costs to a 70-30. That wasn't on for the federal government. They weren't, but we put that motion through to the FCM and through the UBCM. So I'm going to move and I'm going to support this. I'm going to move it forward. And if we wish to change our mind anytime in the future and we wish to go to a municipal police force, I think we need great consultation with our citizens on the cost of that service and the impact on taxes that would be. But at this time here, at this 11th hour, for some people to be coming up around the region saying, well, this isn't good enough. Well, there's been 4 solid years of input and information to it, and you never get everything you want in a contract. And so this is the contract that's before us, and it's basically from the federal government, from what I've talked with the federal end of it, is this is it. There's not going to be any more changes to this agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah, I'm going to echo and a lot of the things that Councillor Asmussen just said. I view this as, first off, we have a deadline. And I think a failure to approve this will be a essentially de facto declaration that we intend to move to set up our own municipal force. And I don't think we're not. No. What's our other option? Are we just crossing our fingers and hoping that there'll be another extension of the deadline? I'm not prepared to do that. If senior governments decide to say, well, that was their deadline, and they haven't agreed, and then, well, I guess you guys are on you got 2 years now to set up your own municipal force. Do we really want to do that? Of course not. I mean, nobody, I don't think anybody's in a position to say that. We don't know what the citizens of Coquitlam think. We know that definitely the last examination on this showed significantly higher charges, costs to us. So I look at this as that we have to agree to this, and it's not as if we can't get out of this. At some stage, even if I were opposed to this contract and had all sorts of questions about it, I know that I'm not ready to say that I want to go municipal or regional. I need more time. So the first thing I would do would be to suggest that, well, you know, let's look into let's look into all the different options we have, and know that when we, after due diligence and great consultation and consideration, that we will have a 25 months notice that we can give to pull out of this contract. I think it is 25 months, not 2 years. And that's our out. And I think that's the responsible thing to do. I think it would be irresponsible to say, no, we're not going to approve this, even though this deadline is just a couple of days away, because we risk having a senior government say, okay, guys, you're on your own. 2 years from now, you had your deadline, and 2 years from now, you better be prepared to set up your own municipal force. I am not ready to do that. I don't think anybody in Coquitlam is ready to go ahead with that. I mean, that's grossly irresponsible, I think. So I'll be supporting approval of this, moving ahead with this, and be open to talking about whether or not we wanted to launch studies into other options, to launch greater studies into the ramifications of this contract, leading to potentially issuing the notice to pull out of this. But at this stage, I think that the most important thing for us to do is to approve this. It's the responsible thing for the citizens of Coquitlam as well. Thank you.
Councillor Hodge.
Well, yeah, I've been really struggling with this one because, you know, I think everybody's made some good points, and you know, and I guess my concern is that, you know, we talk about that this has been going on for 4 years of negotiating. Well, we weren't negotiating. We were watching. And in some cases, as we were watching, we weren't even being given the answers to the questions. So you're right. Here we are at the 11th hour, and after 4 years, there's still questions that haven't been answered. So that's really concerning to me. And I mean, in some of the questions, I may not like the answers I get, but I'd at least like some answers. So, you know, I think that's fundamentally where I have a problem with this. And I know that, well, we're between a rock and a hard place on this, because by not signing, we're essentially giving notice that we want to set up a municipal police force. And that's not the position that I want to find myself in right now, but that is where we are. And, you know, and as I said, that's what I struggle with, because, you know, I've seen some of the numbers, and yes, I know in the past there's been some comparison with municipal police force, but those numbers compare taking the model that we have now and doing the same thing, but with a municipal force. And, you know, when I look at some of the other cities surrounding us that have the same concerns as us, which is Burnaby and our partner Port Coquitlam, that's 2 cities in our area that share the same concerns. The other 2 have municipal police forces, being you know, New Westminster and Port Moody. So this side of the Vancouver border up to the Pitt River, we've got 5 cities with 4 police forces. And I know one of the things that I've been hearing for years is people saying, why do we have so many different police forces in one region? So I'm not convinced that the numbers would be, to set up a police force would be that bad, because we say, well, we got 2 options, our municipal police force or our RCMP. Well, I think there's a third option we haven't looked at, and that's a regional police force in this area. And there may be some economies of scale. Now, we're not going to find those out in the next 4 weeks. We're not going to probably find those out in the next 2 years. But I think those are questions that we need answers to. But, you know, those are questions that we can go out and find our own answers to. We can do that, get that information. But I think that's a viable alternative. But right now, as I said, you know, this has been going on for 4 years, and we can't even get answers, and that really concerns me. Councillor Asmussen mentioned, well, 2/3 of the province have signed on. Well, 1/3 hasn't signed on. So, I mean, there are concerns out there. And I'm just really torn, because I would like the answers. I think our citizens deserve these answers. Our citizens are going to pay for this. And, you know, and they're being asked to sign on the dotted line by midnight whenever, and don't worry, there's some blanks, we'll fill those in later. Well, you know, that's, in some respects, that's a blank check. And I'd feel better if at least we had some of those answers before we signed on. And I'm disappointed that we haven't been able to get a little bit more information at this point. And as I said, I guess what I'd really like is hopefully a little more time to try and at least get a few of the answers, and then we start looking at, you know, once we have the answers, is this really where we want to go? Is this where the citizens of Coquitlam want to go? Do they want to go in a different direction? But as I said, I'd like more answers at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. You know, we mentioned about 40-odd municipalities signed on. Big deal. 1/3 of the municipalities didn't sign on, and what do you think? It's over half, or more than 50% of the population of this of the province that haven't signed. It's
my apologies.
2/3 of the population.
I hate to do this to you, Councillor Sikora. We should have done it before you started speaking. But, we're going to require a motion to extend the meeting past 10:30. Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Robinson to extend. All in favor? Opposed? No one's opposed.
You know, so if I can carry on, the fact is that, you know, there's about 5 or 6 big cities that have not signed on.
Councillor Nicholson's opposed. The motion carries. Go ahead.
So you know, the one thing that bothers me is, number one, timbers, is the Councillor Robinson mentioned, but also, to me, Heather Street. You know, they're moving out of there. What are they doing with the land? What's the money going to go to from Heather? We don't know. We don't know. Who's going to pocket it? Where is it going to be? You know, so those are things that really bother me. You know, you know, the one thing we also created, you know, from Ottawa, I-HIT. Okay, well, if that I-HIT, and all they do is send us the bills. Now, I'm wondering, is it I-HIT really working or not? I don't think it is. The fact that somebody's murdered, the whole team is called out. Are they working days, nights? Are they working on shifts? Are they, because sure to God by now, if they're watching the drug dealers or the, the potential what could happen in this city or any other city, the fact that they run into these shootouts, if they staked out some of these places, but I don't think they do. Because in the last 4 or 5 years, what have we heard? Nothing but people shooting each other openly and never get caught by anybody. And we don't know who they are. So I mean, we can, and who gets the bills? The city gets the bills. Are they functioning properly? No, they're not functioning as far as I'm concerned. Now Victoria now decided to put this traffic division in without consulting the municipalities. All they did is put policemen from Vancouver, from Coquitlam, from other municipalities, and they hit and miss different municipalities as far as traffic enforcement is concerned. The other day was shocking to say, well, we caught some lady going 118 kilometers an hour in a 60-kilometer zone. It's a big shock to them. There's no shock to me. Just go up on Austin Avenue and Como Lake in the morning, and everybody's going 80 and 90. Everybody. Not if you're going 60, they give you the finger, or they're blowing their horn, or they're doing all kinds of crazy things. Who can ever tell the police what to do? We don't have no power. We have no jurisdiction, and neither can we order them to do anything. See? Now, we go to say, well, our city police force is going to cost us a lot more money because, A, we're going to have a lot more policemen. Who's to say we're going to have a lot more policemen? We have 125 or 146 policemen. What's wrong with having a city police force with 146? There's no say that somehow because of city policing we also have to have more policemen. So I think that, being fair, also in Port Moody, they'll deliver flowers to houses if you phone them.
Really?
In here, we can't even get a policeman to go to a house if it's been broken into.
Jeez,
because they're too busy. See? For instance, the other day, I got a call to where the police were saying, well, there's a lot of speeders, we can't do anything about it, the cities are not giving us the money, and a few others, and they're now using the cities and not funding them enough. Well, I think they're being funded pretty good, and, in Port Moody, you get a complaint, a resident gets a complaint, gets a policeman calling on a house to talk to the people. Not here. Mayfair Industrial Park, how many break-in enterings are there that are never reported? Because the businessmen in there are sick and tired of reporting because nobody shows up. And they say the crime is down. Sure, the crime is down because half of them is not in, half the things are not reported in. So to me, I'd rather have a referendum to see whether we go to our police force. It's nice to say it's going to cost us a lot more money. We don't know. We don't know because we haven't studied it. The last time we studied it was in the 70s. I remember that. Okay? So now we should go to referendum. Do we want our police force, our local police, city police force or not? We have the silly thing, a guy gets promoted to inspector. He's transferred out of the city. Guy promoted to a sergeant and gone out of the city. If a New Westminster policeman gets promoted to inspector or sergeant, does he get transferred out? No, he stays in New Westminster. Port Moody, the same. The Vancouver City Police, the same. So why is this stupid idea that somehow you become a sergeant, you get transferred out and pay all these moving costs, selling the house and buying another one for him and a few other things. So there's many, many things that are wrong with the police force. Many, many, many things that are wrong. I think that our police force is trying their best, but they're governed by Ottawa, and they're being governed by E Division. They're certainly not governed by each individual city. You have a police board that sits and controls the police force to a point. We have got nobody. No, we don't have anybody. The police do as they please. So, to me, to be approving something today that you can say we've worked on it for 4 years. I haven't seen anything in 4 years, just in the last few months that this agreement has surfaced. Nothing more. So I can't support it. I think there's a lot of questions that our taxpayers would like to know, of a lot of answers that are not answered.
Councillor Nicholson.
Thank you, Your Worship. I've heard an assumption that if we don't sign this by the deadline, we're effectively saying that we want a municipal police force. I don't read that anywhere. Councillor O'Neill apparently has read it somewhere. I can't. But I think a third of the cities, municipalities in the province haven't signed on to this. I don't really think the province or the federal government is going to say, well, you guys, the Mounties will be out of there in 2 years, 25 months, whatever it is. That's not going to happen. I think delaying the inevitable, and it is inevitable, there is no contract here. A contract is a bargain between parties. We haven't bargained this at all. We got to sit in the room and listen, and that was all there was to it. But at this point, we're saying, well, you know, we can't. Municipal police are too expensive, and we don't know what the choices are. We haven't addressed them. We don't know what the costs would be. There's a whole range of things that we don't know, and we need to know them before we make a decision as to where we want to go. Well, no, I was responding to what somebody else said. Yeah, I don't know what regional would cost. I don't know what municipal would cost. I don't know how many different choices there are. Regional, sub-regional, and it's not metro, I'm pretty sure. There's a whole range of things that we don't know and don't understand. And I believe that we need to take the time to form a plan as to how we're going to work our way through this agreement, to understand all its implications for us, and then consider what our choices of action are. Whether we, 2 months from now, 6 months from now, decide to do a study on what it would cost to choose an alternative. To talk to some of our neighbors about whether they'd like to participate in such a study, or any number of things. And there are a bunch of strictly internal to Coquitlam questions, I believe, that we have to resolve. The agreement is rife with references to the chief elected official, and it's a boilerplate agreement. That's the phrase that they use across the country. Here it means the mayor. In Nova Scotia it might mean the warden. It's a variety of meanings. But I think this council needs to consider to what degree responsibilities and authorities that this agreement defines as being those of the mayor, the chief elected official, belong to that official, or are they held because the council allows it? And to what degree is the chief elected official obliged to inform council as to all those matters? There's budgetary considerations, there's discipline matters, there's all kinds. And I can imagine that there are some that we would all prefer stay with the mayor. And there are others that we think council should have a great deal of involvement with. But I can't tell you what they all are yet, because I haven't managed to pull them all out of the document, and I haven't addressed my mind to them. I would propose that we bring this back to council in 3 weeks' time, and in the time between now and then we address our minds to how we deal with making our future policing decisions after we've agreed to this contract. I believe that we should, at a minimum, take an upcoming Wednesday afternoon and devote it to nothing but this agreement, to trying to get a common understanding of what it means and what the issues are. So I would propose that we defer further consideration of this matter for 3 weeks.
Councillor Nicholson moves a deferral of 3 weeks, seconded by Councillor Zakora. I'm going to hold that in abeyance while we go through the speakers list of those who haven't spoken yet, and then I'm one of them, and Councillor Reamer, I think, is the only other one. Oh, Councillor Reid. Okay, so now we're all on the speakers list. I had put myself next. This was referred to as a $600 million contract. That isn't. It is an agreement that if we continue with the RCMP for 20 years, would have that cost, but it's really a 2-year contract. It says that for the next 2 years we'll be governed by the RCMP, and that applies whether we sign this or not. For the next 2 years we're going to be governed by the RCMP. In fact, nothing changes tomorrow, whether we sign this tonight or not. Nothing changes in our relationship with the RCMP locally. Nothing changes in our options. Our options are to go forward with a municipal agreement. If we decide to go with a municipal police force, it would take a couple of years to ramp that up in any case. I suspect that it would take a couple of years of study and analysis, or at least a year, in order to make sure we had all the costs done. We did an analysis a short time ago, certainly in the last couple of years, in any case, of some of the rough costs, and that showed me that I'd have real hesitance to going down that path. And I've spoken with mayors of communities with municipal police boards, municipal police forces, and the unanimous consent on that in that regard is no, the grass is not necessarily greener on that side of the fence. We don't control a municipal police board. If we had a municipal police force, the mayor would chair the police board, and I think we get to appoint one other. The province appoints most of the rest of them, and we end up with a provincially run police force. So it's either an Ottawa, we could either be mad at Ottawa with the RCMP or mad at the province with the municipal police force. But I get repeatedly from mayors of other communities that, yeah, it's not greener over there. I'm not sure if Port Moody actually does deliver flowers, but I know that they do respond to every call, and that's a decision that they've made. We have gone a different direction in Coquitlam, and I'm quite proud of the fact that going in that direction has reduced the crime rates, particularly property crime, in our community in so many ways, and that's both provable and unprovable. There's always allegations that people don't report property crime, and therefore that's why the stats go down. And yet, in those instances where reporting is required, such as with car theft, no one doesn't report their car stolen. Car thefts are down too, so it does suggest that we've had pretty good success with policing. But we can't order the police to do anything. There was some suggestion that, with a municipal police force, you kind of run your police force. No, you don't. You don't order police forces in Canada to do things. There are countries of the world, despotic countries, where government officials order the police to do things. I don't want the right to order our police to do things. I do want increased control over costs, and I wanted improved information systems, and we got both of those. We didn't get them perfectly. Councillor Asmundson, you never get everything you want in a contract. Well, you do sometimes get everything you want in a contract, but that is a contract between you and another party where you get to negotiate. There's no chance in the world that 60 communities in BC were going to negotiate individual contracts with the RCMP or with the federal government for the RCMP. This was an agreement between the province and the federal government on RCMP. We are creatures of the province, and so this isn't a perfect system. But the allegations, for example, that gang killings aren't being handled properly by IHIT. Well, there are gang killings in every city of the world, including cities that have integrated police forces, cities that have one regional police force. So I disagree on that. I think IHIT actually is a good model of how to integrate a systemic, a regional system for a particular type of policing. And I think we should explore regional, and I think we actually will explore regional policing much further, particularly as Wally Opal's program goes forward. That's part of his mandate, is to examine regional, or the structure of policing in the Lower Mainland and see whether a better system could be put forward. And we heard from a former mayor of Vancouver who argued for regional policing. And I suspect Vancouver would really like regional policing because it would give them access to our police department on the Friday and Saturday nights when they put in so much overtime. But in the end, nothing changes tomorrow. And this agreement, I mean, it's not like we have a choice. This is, and for the next 2 years, we will govern by the we will be policed by the RCMP. For the next 2 years, we will be policed by the RCMP. If I didn't mind the agreement last year, and I didn't hear any complaints about the agreement we had last year, really, then I shouldn't mind this. This is an improvement in every way, in so many ways, not in every way, but everyone has to agree that this is an improvement over what we are currently live with the RCMP. So I'm not sure why I would oppose this, but if I am opposed to this, we're simply left with the fact that for the next 2 years, we're going to be policed by the RCMP. And we're also left with an irrefutable fact that municipal police force would be significantly more expensive. And we can examine that if we want, but if we decide tonight, let's examine the possibility of going with a municipal police force, we should also look at this agreement and sign it, because for the next 2 years, we're going to be policed by the RCMP, even if we decide to go with a municipal police force. So at the outset of this, though, I said I'm perfectly fine with giving council members any amount of time they need legitimately to find the answers to the questions that they need answered. So I don't have I'm reluctant to oppose the idea of further delays. I don't think the province is going to say, okay, Burnaby, we know that Burnaby is probably doing some partisanship there, but nonetheless, when Burnaby decides not to sign it tonight, I don't think the province is going to say, Burnaby, you've just lost the RCMP, get ready to go with the municipal force. And I've mentioned actually to the Minister of Justice here in British Columbia that I have made that commitment to council that we will take as much time as necessary. I don't think I don't see that urgency. So I'm fine with the idea of a deferral. I will support the deferral. I don't know if it will pass tonight, but if the deferral doesn't pass, I will be supporting this agreement. I think we've negotiated hard as a province with the federal government, and we've got some of what we asked for, not all, but that's where it's not a perfect system. Councillor Reamer.
Thank you. Well, you've pretty much said everything that I was going to say. We've already delayed this twice already. We've received extensive information on this contract. My feeling is I have enough information that I want to go ahead with this decision tonight. A reference was made to economies of scale with a regional police force, and that is very true, but we also need to realize that when we're dealing with the RCMP, we're dealing with economies of scale right there. So many of their resources are shared. Their integrated teams are shared. So we're dealing with a lot of that right now. This is an agreement that's been negotiated by our provincial and federal governments. Some elected officials, local as well, have been involved in this process. And they have worked really, really hard over a long period of time to make this contract as good as it can be. As Mayor Stewart said, we can't expect every local government to be negotiating their own contract with the RCMP. And so we have to put forth some trust in the established committee to do that work on our behalf. And as I say, they have worked very hard on it, and we need to recognize that. We do have a really good idea about what the costs are for municipal police force. We've been down that road before. We know that it's going to mean probably increased taxes for our taxpayers. It's going to be very, very, very costly if we were to go down that route. We know from our colleagues in neighboring municipalities that have city police forces that it isn't all it's chalked up to be. It's expensive, and they do have a police board that consists primarily of government appointees. And so I think that we actually have a very good deal here with the RCMP in the communication we have with them, and are overseeing the budget for them as well. So I am going to be supporting this. I don't, while I always in the past have supported deferrals for the purposes of gathering further information, we've already deferred this twice, and I think if we haven't obtained the information having deferred it twice before, we're not going to gain much more information by deferring it again. I would like to go ahead and make this decision tonight. Thank you.
This has been a really interesting process for me. I did attend last year at the UBCM all the meetings and did have a chance to talk to Mayor Fassbender about stuff. One of the things that you realize when you listen to how much negotiation Minister Bond did with Mayor Fassbender, and that they were negotiating not from a free spirit way that two people would go into a negotiation. They were negotiating under this umbrella about, this is all thou shalt do. These are what we're going to let you do, and you negotiate those things. So I really believe that they did a good job. I really do. They were told, here's the parameters, and we're the feds, you like it or lump it, and we'll let you negotiate a little bit here and a little bit here, but when you really want to get into the meat of it, I don't think so. And that was very upsetting to me. What is upsetting right now is I keep hearing that we want to form our own police force. That, I think Mr. Dumont has made it very clear, is definitely not in the cards for me. Policing is a huge part of our budget. But I do like the idea of a regional force. I really do. I like the idea of talking to, at Metro on Friday, talking to Malcolm Brody and to the mayor of West Van District, Richard Walton. Pardon? North Van. I'm sorry, North Van. And West Van has one, and then they say, well, here we are. We share a detachment, that the city of North Van and the district. And I was more interested in talking to the district of North Van, and they share, and I was interested in talking to Richmond. We all have things that we want in this contract that aren't there. And what concerns me is I've also heard little remarks about, oh, it's a left-right thing again, all this politics, and I don't believe it is. I honest to God don't believe that. I really believe that we're all out there trying to do the best darn job we can for our citizens for the least amount of money. I do not have some of the problems that Lou has with the RCMP. I actually think they do a good job for a force that has three masters. They have to listen to the hierarchy from the RCMP. They have to listen to the feds. I guess if you want to hear four, they listen to the province. And then we're sort of at the bottom of the totem pole, but we're the ones that have to deal with them, one-on-one and every day. And I don't know about you, but if I had to listen to all those masters, I'd be having a tough time some days doing my job too. Some of the things in there, the sale of the land they have in Vancouver and getting a new place in Surrey and all that stuff, I mean, that's going to happen no matter how many years someone's in any place. So I'm not going to have that much difficulty with dealing with that. But right now my main problem is this. I believe we share a detachment, and I believe our partners in this detachment are looking for a deferral too. And if they're looking for a deferral and we don't defer and at least have a conversation with them, where does that put us? And so, Your Worship, I heartily agree with lots of things that you've said. I really do, and all of my colleagues around here, we all have good points. But when at the UBCM, when the police contract came up, and you listen to a lot of the smaller municipalities who have RCMP around there, well, what else are we going to do? So they got 2/3 of the province signed up, but I don't know that they all came willingly. I think it was, we don't have a choice. And that's disturbing. We should want our police force because we should have some kind of a good rapport. I think it's difficult when you have any kind of a federal organization trying to get the nitty-gritty details that they need to deal with down to a local level. And I believe that's a hard job for them to do. If it was not for the fact that I believe our partner in this detachment was having second thoughts about passing this, I probably would vote for it. But because they, along with a couple of other cities, right now are going to try and get more information. I don't know what information they're going to get, but I really believe we need to sit and talk to our partner in this detachment and then come out as one detachment, either approving or not approving this. And that's why I would support a deferral, and only that reason, Your Worship.
And now on the motion to defer. I'm not going to bother with the second round. That was the completion of the debate on the original motion. The motion to defer was moved by Councillor Nicholson, who wants to elaborate on his rationale.
No, actually I don't. I think it's all being said very thoroughly. I did want to offer you one bit of information which I think makes the point of the complexity of the agreement. Because a couple of people have said, so we've got the RCMP for another 2 years. There's no question. We've got the RCMP for another 2 years. The agreement says that you have to give 25 months' notice to terminate on March 31st. So we have the RCMP until at least March 31st, 2015, which is a lot more than 2 years. And it means we have to understand this agreement if we're going to live within it. And there's way more to it than that one point that I happened to pick out as I was reading. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, Councillor Asmussen.
Well, I'm not going to support the deferral. I mean, we've had this twice deferred now. The first time came up, people wanted more information, came back. We said we would defer it by Councillor Reid, that we wanted to go up to LMLGA, talk to the people, come back, and let's deal with it. So we've extended it twice already on a deferral, and I don't see what 3 weeks is going to change in that decision-making, because I think we'll be back in the same place with the people with the same desires, not want to deal with this, and their same positions. I think the comment made by the mayor is we've had a contract for a number of years to the RCMP. We've done a lot of good things, our crime reduction here. We have got some of the things that we wanted within the cost accountability controls in there. The one thing I do want to point out when we talk about our neighboring municipality, I'm not bound by what their decisions are and their partner, and they're not bound by ours. When we approved our budget, we approved more police officers because there's a commitment to hire X number of ratios, and we're supposed to work together on that. Port Coquitlam did not agree and did not hire their share of the officers as we did, so they're behind the ratio on us and are slipping behind. So I'm not going to support a deferral. It probably may pass, but I think we should be making a decision now. What POCO decides to do and what their decision is their own independent decision. They made an independent decision not to keep to the agreement of hiring the number of officers that we have hired on their own decision, which affects our operation of our agreement between the two of us. So I think that if we want to create our own police force or make the studies, we have all the time to do that with this agreement. This agreement is better than what we have today. It has a better cost-sharing arrangement. The costing of the police officers will happen and will be increased even if we don't sign this agreement. So I will not be supporting the deferral motion. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll be supporting it for many reasons. Number one, we're talking about, some councils signed a deal with the UBC or with Vancouver here under UBCM last year to somehow support that the taxes shouldn't go up any more than the cost of living. Okay? Now, the situation is I don't have a crystal ball 4 years from now that the RCMP are going to be worth 3.7%. What happens if we have a real recession? I'm talking about real recession like we normally have had, to where you can't afford to give anybody any raises. Theirs is forecasted for 4 years from now. I don't have a crystal ball 4 years from now to say somehow that they should get 3.75% increase in the fourth year or 3.5% 3 years from now. I mean, to me, they negotiate the contract for 2 years or whatever it is, but not give me something in writing that this, you shall pay this amount of money. Because it's not even negotiated with anybody outside of the province and the federal government. That's all. So I can't support it for you know, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball. Anybody around here has got a crystal ball that we can take a look and guess what's going to happen 4 or 5 years from now? Guarantee you nobody can. But yet, I'm willing to support the contract. I'm willing to support the contract. It's the best we can get. You know, with the big increases and everything else, that's a bunch of crap. The taxpayers deserve better than that.
Okay, Councillor O'Neill.
Just like to reiterate a point that I made earlier, is that we do not know what will happen a couple of days from now if we don't approve this. We do know, however, that we have all of our options open to us if we approve it. We have our destiny. We can control our destiny. We approve it, and then we can take all the time we want to study all the different options. We still have the option of opting out of this, opting out of the RCMP contract if we give notice. We have the option of continuing with the RCMP contract after we do the due diligence, after we consult with the public. But if we make the decision tonight, we hope that the senior levels of government extend the time. But we do not know that right now. We do not know that. So it's a big gamble. And if you're willing to gamble, you can. Now, you're always asking for wagers and bets. I guess you're a betting man, Councillor Sikora, so you're taking a gamble. But it's a big gamble, and you're not just gambling. You're not just gambling your money, you're gambling the money of every resident in Coquitlam, because if the government, senior government says, well, you've effectively now said that you rejected this contract, you have put yourself on the route to municipal or regional force, and we know that that is going to cost more money because the 10% federal subsidy will not be there. So that's a big gamble. I am not willing to take that. Anyway, that's enough. So I don't want to gamble like that.
Thank you. And that's the end of the speaking list on the motion to defer. The motion was to defer. No further speakers. All in favor of a 3-week deferral. All opposed to that, that's Councillors O'Neill, Reamer, and Asmundson. The motion carries.
That concludes the items on the formal agenda.
Said I would. Yeah, I said I would.
Second.
Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Reamer, second by Councillor Asmundson. All in favor, opposed, carried unanimously. Thank you all for coming.